Has anyone ever made the comment to you, if you could prove to me that God exists, I'd believe in him? That's the position of the atheists. They don't believe in God. You might have had somebody ask you or make the comment that, well, I'm not sure if there's God or not. There could be, there might not be. You know, that's the agnostic position. Functionally and practically speaking, they're atheists, but you know, they don't lean to God that way. The third kind of person is, and reminds me of a friend of mine at Sandia National Labs where I worked for 15 years. He'd say, like most engineers, I can't believe random chance events, long periods of time really created everything like evolution says. I believe it was engineered. But when you would ask him and you would say, Tony, do you think that's God? He goes, well, I don't know what it is, but clearly something from the beginning created everything. We don't have this order. We don't have this sort of engineered society, life that we have without it. So it's those three kind of people that I want to talk about today. And for the first time, I'm going to show you a physics proof based on the first of all physics, mechanics, and how that mathematically then proves there's God. So the first thing I want to talk about is actually this bungee cord. And I'm pulling it on the outside, and that's called a traction force. Traction force, it's on the outside. This body in here is a continuous body, so I'm going to call that a continuum body, okay? And so it stretches. Inside, as I stretch this thing, there's something inside, and there's a relationship between something called stress and strain. So on the outside is a traction force, the inside's a continuum body. Now, we use that idea not just on a simple cord like this, but on designing all kind of component structures, whether it's a train, a plane, or a car. This happens to be a control arm on a Cadillac, and in this particular material, it's an A356 cast aluminum, there are different length scales from electrons to atoms to particles to grains, all the way up these what I call heterogeneous microstructures throughout the length scales. So this is a continuous body, but on the outside are the traction forces. The axle comes through here. The vibration dampener comes right here, and there's other connection points. All these points on the outside are called traction forces to help design what this control arm is. Now, that control arm goes through different, what we call boundary conditions. This boundary condition that I had here was uniaxial. The boundary conditions through this control arm, there's about 22 different conditions in which a Cadillac is driven. But there's one in particular called bending, and a bending of a plate. And this bending of a plate is another thing where my fingers now are the traction force on the outside, and inside there are different stresses and strains happening inside of this thing. What I'm going to show you is mathematically a little bit later that the cosmos, which many physicists believe, astrophysicists believe, that is like a balloon. So there's a three-dimensional coordinate axis on the space-time member, so it's a four-dimensional thing. And so the universe is expanding, and each one of these like little colors here represents a galaxy, represents a solar system or a cluster or stars and things like that. And what I'm going to show you that this galaxy, actually, the cosmos, the universe, is a continuous body. I'm going to show you the math for that. So there's something, a traction on the outside that's controlling it. And what I'm claiming for you today is that traction is God's hand upon the outside of the cosmos. That's simply it. That's simply the story. Okay? So now I'm going to walk you through some slides to show you some equations to explain what's going on here. So first, let's consider this bungee cord. So we have a length L, and in 1700, Robert Hooke first came up with a relationship of taking this length L and relating it to a force. And the force, the traction force F, or T, is what is pulling on the outside, and it extends it a displacement X. Okay, so the traction force is T, the displacement spring stiffness is what's the material continuum body relationship with this X displacement. Now, for about 100 years, they didn't know what would break something at that point. And it wasn't until they got the idea from Cauchy that said we need to not only get the force, but we have to divide it by the area, the cross-sectional area here. And when you do that, you divide both sides by the cross-sectional area, you come up with a different term, but a similar relationship. And the terminology is now that force, or that traction force, becomes a stress, and the X, the displacement, becomes a strain on the inside, still dictated by this traction force on the outside. And it has a relationship that we call C, the elastic modulus, okay? Now, in general, what Cauchy said in the 1820s was that any body, any continuous body that has stresses and strains inside will have a traction on the outside. And this is called Cauchy's law. And it's that simple formula, T equals sigma n, where n is the unit direction vector. Now, applying that to this control arm here, we see that there are different T's all over this control arm on the outside, the different traction forces. And this is the different parts of the car that are constraining upon this. So inside of this, there will be all these stresses and strains. Okay, and it'll be gradients of stresses and strains. And this project, this is a 5-year project in which we studied and we're trying to optimize the design of that Cadillac control arm. The idea was if you take 25% weight off a Cadillac, it'll make 75 miles a gallon. Now, the CAFE requirements for year 2025 is all vehicles are going to have 52 miles per gallon. So what we're saying is, whatever the weight is on this vehicle, if we could just subtract the weight, use our modeling techniques, then we can optimize this vehicle and we can meet the requirements. So this was the first time this was done, in fact, for an automotive vehicle. And this project was from 1995 to year 2000. And in the upper left-hand corner, if you can show that, the control arm was put on the table, and the people were trying to predict where it would fail. And point B is where the material scientists said it would fail. And the people that were doing finite element analysis, and finite element analysis simply means that they take a structure like this and they break it up into little elements. And when they break up the little elements, then they put them all together in a mathematical scheme, just like that equation, F equals Kx, force equals the stiffness of each little element, and then they add them all up, okay? And they were wrong, and the reason they were wrong was because it was the combination of what was inside the material at all these different length scales, from electrons to atoms to particles to grains, combined with the boundary conditions of all the tractions that were going in. And when you put all those together, as the bottom left-hand picture shows here, I was able to predict the experiment and what was going to happen in the experiment. It showed the exact location of where it was going to break. Now, that wasn't the purpose just to be predictive and to be right and to be correct, although that's key because the community didn't believe that you could be predictive on simulations or in using these continuous body idea with tractions on the outside. But now we have validated this over and over and again, so much so that on the lower right, we took 25% weight off, and what those two plots show, that the load-bearing capacity increased 50%, the fatigue life doubled, and the original part was $15, but the new part, 25% less weight, was $13. So this showed for the first time you can use these very complicated modeling schemes for an automotive part. And this simulation here shows that when you put those boundary conditions on, well, it's supposed to show it. Well, what you would see is all these different beautiful colors coming in, kind of like this bending plate right here. And those different colors show the multi-scale heterogeneities of the stress and the strain. So we talked about the uniaxial loads, the different loads on the control arm, and now bending. And the reason I want to go to bending is because what Einstein talked about in the cosmos and the general theory of relativity was he saw space as being bent. And we have equations for this as well. And if you look here at the stress sigma there on the left-hand side of the equation, you see that the strains, the red epsilons with the XX and YY, that simply means in the X direction and the Y direction, you have these same strains. And the relationship, you see the C there, that it's a little bit more complicated with bending, but there are tractions on the outside, and it gives you this relationship of stress strain on the inside. And we use this all the time for like sheet metal bending and things like this. So what I've talked about from Robert Hooke was this F equals KX solution. And then from Cauchy, we got the two equations, one where the stress sigma equals this C multiplied by this epsilon. Don't worry about the superscripts and subscripts for now. And plus this Cauchy law, this T, this traction, equals the sigma times N. Now, how does that relate to Einstein's general theory of relativity? Because if we relate it to Einstein's general theory of relativity, which applies to all the cosmos, then that says that that T traction is on the outside, and it says that there's a God exists on the outside who's running and controlling things. Okay? So let's look at it. So this capital T in the lower equation is a force stress-like equation. And the G sub UV on the right side is a strain-like displacement equation, but it's in bending. Okay, so then in Einstein's equations, which is the capital T there on the left, versus, say, just the stress, the three-dimensional stress, which is a 3x3 matrix on the right, we see actually that the stress is a subset of Einstein's equations. The 3x3 matrix, the T11, T12, T13, that series in the matrix, in the 4x4 matrix of Einstein, is identical with the stress, continuum stress, the continuum body stress that we just talked about related to the tractions, okay? And when you run these calculations, you do the bending, you find out that the Laplacian of the strain, and the Laplacian of the strain means simply that there is a gradient of the strains, and then you take the divergence of those. And the divergence means it goes in all the directions. So anytime there's bending, you're going to see this gradient and Laplacian of the strain. It's actually proportional to gravity, where gravity, this kappa here, equals 8 pi g. That's the gravitational constant over the speed of light squared. So the strain now in the space, in the fabric of space, the Laplacian of that is proportional to gravity. That's what causes gravity. And when you put the equations together down at the bottom, this is the first time this was shown, the relationship between the T, or the stress-like term, and on the right, you have the Laplacian and the G, which are the strain-like terms. So when you think about how the cosmos were made and how they were produced, and this inflationary theory that's proposed, which may or may not be true, but the idea is now the whole cosmos with all these multi-scale structural features, this general theory of relativity applies to. So the same elastic constants that we think about with this bungee cord, the same elastic constants that we think about with this control arm are now applied to the cosmos. And the cosmos, just like this control arm that has all these different length scales of structures in it, the cosmos has different length scales of structures. They have galaxies, and then the Milky Way galaxy, we have solar systems that are smaller, we have the Earth that's smaller, and then we have all kinds of different length scales within the Earth. So there are these multi-scale hierarchical structures within the cosmos. So the idea then, the tractions are external to the continuum body, to the cosmos, which means that those T's, those traction forces, are God's actions on the cosmos. All right? So this means that it's a boundary value problem. The boundary value problem is a mathematical term, and it says because God's actions on the external surface of the cosmos, it's current. It's now. It's happening this very second. That's what the boundary value problem, those tractions are happening right now. Also means that God influences everything inside the cosmos, all of it. All the operations, everything's by the T that's on the outside. And just like you get different gradients of structure and different things happening over here, then over here, then over here, from one situation, one environmental condition, all these different things can be happening at the same time. Then each region within the cosmos will behave differently because of the local cause and effect structure property relations throughout the action of God, and it's the same on the outside of the cosmos, meaning that all these things are happening inside the cosmos, maybe from just one action. So there's some conclusions. Number one, God exists outside the space-time matter continuum. Well, that refutes atheism because there is a God exists, and it refutes agnosticism, because the agnostic says, I don't know if it exists. Secondly, the mathematical description here is not an initial value problem, but a boundary value problem. The initial value problem sets up the mathematical situation at the beginning and lets it go, and nothing happens after that. That would be what a deist thinks related to the cosmos and the universe. That's not what we're talking about here. It's a boundary value problem. So in other words, the current situation is that it's the current state of the boundary value problem that's controlling what's happened in the cosmos. And even attraction can happen like this. So attractions can happen different ways. Traction forces to show that there is a God that exists. This has implications. One implication now, because this physics in this math through mechanics proves this, it identifies that there is a spiritual nature to things. There is a spiritual nature. You can call it what you want. It may not be spiritual, but clearly there's something outside the space-time matter continuum that has interaction inside the space-time matter continuum. That has ramifications to what I call spiritual ideas and spiritual notions of what's going on. So let's look at it. Just like there is a God on the outside and controlling every action within happens inside, spiritually the same thing. He can make one action, he can do one thing right now, this second, affect somebody in Los Angeles, affect somebody in China, affect somebody in Africa. And then it's very different inside of each thing, just like this control arm is. It's different happenings happen inside each thing, just by one action of his on the outside, and it's different. So it suggests that he's real. It suggests that he's active, and clearly proves through applied mechanics and the mathematics associated with it that there is a God and he's in control on the outside of the universe. May the traction force be with you.
Doc, I caught about 10% of that, and it's way over my pay grade. You're way too smart for me. We're going to sit down and have a Q&A. I think they're going to bring out some chairs for us. Got several great questions from our students. And the first one, and I love this, that somebody wanted to just really personalize this. Can you tell us a little bit of your personal testimony? I mean, not just when you became interested in engineering and this field, but how did the Lord save you? And tell us a little bit about your own story. And did you always know you wanted to go into this field?
No, not at all. In fact, good question. First of all, at the time when I became a Christian, I was a materialist, a pure materialist, meaning I did not believe in anything invisible. I didn't believe in anything I couldn't taste, touch, feel, or see. And to make a long story short, I was seeking for truth, for knowledge, and I didn't know I was seeking God. So like most people, I sought other ideas, from drugs to rock and roll to being the smartest person in class to sports, to all these things. And finally, although I grew up in a Lutheran church, it was a religious experience, not a relational experience. And my brother, my elder brother, who was a drug dealer with LSD, said that, Mark, and I asked him, I said, "You stopped dealing in drugs, why?" And he said, "Because of Jesus." And I said, "What?" And he said, no, it's not the church. It's not what we're learning in Lutheranism. It's Jesus. And I said, what's that about? And so anyway, he and my cousin, Russell, who passed away not too long ago, Russell was puking his guts out on LSD one night. And he was dying, and he knew he was dying. And his mother had prayed for him since 1960 till 1980, basically. And this happened in 1980, where he gave his life to the Lord and said, Lord, if you save me this night, I'll give my life to you. And in the morning, he woke up in front of his house, out in front of this bush, and he was clean. So he immediately went and told my brother Stephen. So he led him to the Lord. And about a couple months later is when I met with Stephen and Russell, and they actually went through the book of Daniel to lead me to Christ. Wow. You know, the dream where the golden head was Nebuchadnezzar, and the silver age with Alexander the Great, and then you had the Babylonian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, going down the Roman Empire and breaking into the two, and then the 10 toes representing the European nation that came out of the Roman Empire, and then this big rock hits it at the end. And I said, well, what's the big rock? Because they knew I was interested in history, so they were bringing the history and all this. Right. And they said all this was shown in 486 BC, and all these things happen after, showing that predictive prophecy proves the Bible. So I was stunned by this. I'd gone to church every Sunday in the Lutheran church, never came across this. And so I said, well, what's this rock that hits? And they said, well, that's Jesus coming back, and he's going to destroy everything. And then I said, what happens when when you don't follow Christ, or you're not a Christian, you're not a real Christian? And they said, well, and then they went to Revelation. They showed me when Jesus comes, you're going to be left behind, and you're going to experience all this hell. And if you die, you're going to go to hell, and you'll be damned forever. And so they literally scared basically the hell out of me.
Yeah. It's really interesting that God used the book of Daniel for you. Goodness, we all get trained like the beaded bracelet and the Roman road and John 3:16 and John 14:6. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Much simpler paths than literally going down the book of Daniel historically. And I think that leads into this next question. Many of us in the room are watching online and are aware and familiar with many of the concepts today that you presented, because we're passionate about math and physics. However, that's not the case for a lot of people who aren't wired that way. I mean, you lost them at, the second word that you used, that was 9 syllables or whatever. And so that said, what are some ways that you'd recommend utilizing these same ideas as an evangelistic tool? So something very rare, historical, reality was used to present the gospel to you. How can someone use a very simple, everyday man language and engineering to reveal the gospel to someone?
So here's the point. This is not a salvation message. This is a pre-evangelistic message. And what I mean is that, and just like all apologetics, there's barriers for unbelief. And what happened, all these barriers are there to inhibit people from accepting the gospel in Christ. And what we're trying to do here is, if you have this barrier and you go through this and you go through your day and say, does God exist? Does God exist? Well, no, it's been proven. He does exist. So now it leads you into faith. It leads you to a place of making a commitment. I'm going to decide. I'm going to make a decision now, and I'm not going to allow this unbelief, because it's been fought against. Unbelief doesn't exist now because it's been destroyed, saying that there is proof. Now I have an alternative here, and I'm going to have my decision go towards God.
Explain to me how, so if you're using this you're saying the word prove, prove the existence of God. Is there any difference between using that word, prove as in showing evidence, versus reveal, or versus affirm? Why did you choose that word instead of?
Very good, very good. It's very much a specific word to mathematics. And when the questions are asked about proof, it's in the context of mathematics. I could have used the word evidences, but there's other evidences that show God's exist. For example, in a multi-objective design optimization of anything, that if you have one objective, like if God said, or anybody said, I want to design a finger and have one objective to have it point, well, the solution converges and you don't need anything outside of that. But as soon as it has more than one objective, for example, it has two objectives. It says, I want to grab, or it has to work in the context of this hand. There's three objectives already. Anytime the multi-objective design optimization is used, intelligence outside the system has to make the decision because there's more than one answer. It's called a Pareto front and a Pareto frontier, and there's all these solutions for this. So intelligence outside the system, that's an evidence. I wouldn't call it a mathematical proof, where what I've gone through today is actually mathematical proof.
Well said. I can't wait to watch it later, slow it down and look it all up. We share a little bit of vision. I mean, in this room, we don't have just engineering majors and minors, but we have people that are watching online as well, a lot of parents of these students, and then students that are just interested in this topic coming in. As our new dean, share a little vision. The other day I was in the president's office, and I saw some of the beginnings, the genesis of plans for the new School of Engineering facility. It's exciting what you guys are cooking up for the future. Share a little bit of vision of what you see this school becoming more and more. And then on a practical sense, how do you see us sending these champions for Christ into these fields and the differences that they're going to make? What do you see in the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now?
Yeah, when I first started engineering, I didn't know what engineering was, honestly. And I've told these students this. I thought it was a person on the back of a caboose of a train, and I had really no idea. My dad said, you're good in math and science, go engineering. I said, okay, whatever Dad says, I'm going to do. Yeah. Well, it wasn't till years ago that I came across Theodore von Karman's statement. It said, science is the discovery of what exists. Engineering is a creation of what never was. Science is discovery of what exists. Engineering is a creation of what never was. But if you look at the word engineering and where it came from Robert Fulton in the steam engine, and when the educational process came in, and that was when the term was coined. So, and then you start asking, well, how many people do engines today in engineering? Well, 1%, small number. So it's really a misnomer. It's not a good word for the process of engineering, really. So creationeering is a better word. So if you go to von Karman, it's saying engineering is creation of what never was. Let's think about creationeering and using that. Now, in the context of the Bible, when I think of creationeering, I say, okay, well, there's 8 steps to engineering. First, we design, then we analyze, and we synthesize that design, and then we make it, we procure it. And then we do logistics. We worry about how to put, say, car parts together. And then we assemble it. We put the car together. Then it's ready to go in service life performance. And then we worry about sustainability long term. But then there's death and recycling. Well, that's engineering, okay? But when you look at another aspect of God, there's a business side. And you say, really? Yeah. One, God's interested in humans. So that's human personnel. He's interested in moral law. So there's finances. He's interested in being good stewards, finances. He's interested in communications, so sales and marketing. He's interested in organizational structure management. So when you think about these 8 steps in the process of engineering and these 5 business things, you put them together, you realize that's how he creationeered the astrosphere, the biosphere, the geosphere. So those are necessary and sufficient conditions for that, and that's what I want our students to get from now on. And that's what I'm trying to coin. We're trying to trademark the word creationeering here at Liberty University and putting that forward in that context. When we go from Genesis 1:28, it's dominion mandate. There's 2 words in there when he says dominion and rule. Actually, one's related to science, one's related to engineering. One's related to studying what exists. In Romans 1:20 says that we can understand his character, his nature, and his attributes by the things he has made. So he has revealed himself if we study these things, okay? And then we take those understandings, and then in Proverbs 8:12 it says, he gives knowledge for witty inventions. So innovation, okay, comes about after we get knowledge from him and his character and attributes. Now we can extend the space of knowledge with invention. Both of these, whether it's knowledge for science or innovation for engineering, both come from Revelation. Deuteronomy 29:29. says the secret things belong to the Lord our God. But those things that are revealed, he has given unto us and our children forever. So Johannes Kepler said it like this. If you imagine all the knowledge that we will have, it's inside of here. The secret things are on the outside where God is doing his traction forces, and he will keep those secret things to himself. We won't know till the end. But inside of this knowledge, there's a small set right now that we know, right? And to get from here to here, it's new science and new innovation in engineering that comes by revelation, it says in Deuteronomy 29:29. The cool thing about that, David, is they don't have to be as handsome as us. They don't have to be tall, strong, fast. They just ask by faith, and God gives revelation. So the impact of what we want to do with our students in Champions for Christ, we want them to understand this creationary model, this framework of doing the engineering with the business aspect, with the aspect of focusing on an audience of one.
I mean, if I was a parent and my child was interested in engineering and I heard that, I'd think, why would I want him to go anywhere else, than to sit under that kind of leadership and that kind of vision. But
I'm trying to recruit the business students to come back to engineering.
Yeah, well done today. Wait till they see your new facilities. It's going to be awesome. So in 5 years from now, if I walk into that school and I'm walking into different classroom settings or different even labs, what am I seeing? What do you see? Just a lot of activity. Give us a vision of what we would see.
You're going to see some high-performance computing simulations, this simulation-based design of structures. We're going to take materials. We're going to go from processing materials to studying the structures of them, like the multi-scale structures on this control arm, to the properties. And we're doing multi-physics properties. We just showed mechanical things today, but we could add temperature. We could add chemistry for corrosion.
Are you guys going to blow a lot of stuff up?
Yeah, but that's back up on the hill.
Yeah.
Not down in the building. Yeah. So we're gonna integrate these things. We're thinking about how then to take this process structure property, put it in a cyber infrastructure, have cybersecurity, run these things remote. Then you can do it on the moon. So we're trying to, there's a moon to Mars emphasis now with NASA and Blue Origin, Tesla, these kind of places. And so to get there, though, the materials on the moon are much different than here. So if we can set that up here, we can put it on the moon and the Mars.
Last question, and I don't know if Emmerich is here, and I'm going to ask him to come and pray. Is Emmerich Vandermark in the room? Yeah, Emmerich, come on up and just pray. I've heard from him as an engineering student about your impact, and already so much that's trending in a very exciting way towards the school. So I don't know, he loves the Lord, so I'm going to ask him to pray over you. But what's a prayer request? How can we be praying for you? I know right now you got strep, all right, so we're praying. You did well, by the way. God gave you the strength today, but how can we pray for you? Yeah, amen, let's thank him. Love you, brother. How can we pray over you?
My main prayer is, I feel like God has showed me something, and I need to communicate it clearly to our upper management. I need to communicate it to our students, to our faculty. I'm trying to communicate it to the different deans around the country, at different conferences. I'm trying to communicate it. I presented just inklings of this, to a conference in Indianapolis a couple months ago. There's a conference coming up in Cyprus where there'll be about 10 to 20 Nobel Prize winners. The European National Academies will be there, and I'll be presenting about an hour on this today to them. So I have to be a good steward of it, and have to understand the audiences, how to communicate what's going on and what God's doing here at the School of Engineering at Liberty University.
Amen. Let's pray for just all of you and just our dean as well. All right, let's pray.
Dear Heavenly Father, God, I thank you so much for Dr. Horstmeyer and him coming to Liberty University. You've brought him here for a specific purpose. Nothing happens by accident, God, and I know that to be true in my life, and I know that to be true in his life as well. So, God, I also thank you for this vision that you've given him about your creation and how you want him to be a vessel for your glory in the world. So, God, I just ask that you be with him. Do you give him wisdom as he goes and speaks to all sorts of different audiences, secular, Christian. God, that you would speak through him, you would move in the hearts of people who don't believe you, God, that their lives would be changed, God, and that ultimately your glory would be seen on the earth. God, I thank you so much for what he's done so far in the School of Engineering. It's been a blessing to all of us. I know that he's seeking you in what he does. God, I ask that you continue to bless him, give him wisdom on how to optimize systems and do things the best way. I know that's something that you care about as well. So I thank you for Dr. Horstmeyer. I pray that he gets well soon from his sickness and that we don't get sick either. But I just thank you so much for his ministry, for his for how he's ministering to our students. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Thank you so much. Man, exciting things are coming into this school. God bless you guys. You're dismissed. We'll see you tomorrow at Convocation.